Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be giving you a full tank review on this infamous vehicle, the Panzerkampfwagen 2 Ausf J. Chances are when you were starting off your World of Tanks journey that you would have encountered one of these tier 3 premium German light tanks at least once and probably felt like you were banging your head against a wall trying to take it down. And that is because it is the most heavily armored tier 3 tank in the game with 80mm of frontal armor and 50mm of side armor, which is amplified by the fact that this vehicle gets preferential matchmaking, meaning that it can never meet tier 5 vehicles. If all of this sounds too good to be true, well, it kind of is, because this vehicle is probably the most expensive tank you can purchase in the game, and currently it is available for €100 on the European server. I've got one of the most crazy games of World of Tanks I've ever seen coming right up after I run down the statistics of this vehicle, highlight some of its key features, and then finally discuss whether this tank is worth the price tag. And if you're one of the players who have no intention of picking up this seal clubbing monstrosity but want to know how to fight back against it, I'll give you some tips for cracking open its ultra thick armor. So the Panzer II-J has 260 hit points, which while it can enable you to take a hit from an equal tiered opponent and a lower tiered opponent, it can meet Hetzers with their 105mm guns, which does leave you firmly within the realm of a one-shot. Now, while the tank weighs over 18 tons, it doesn't get the best engine with 160 horsepower, giving this vehicle a terrible specific power ratio for a light tank of 8.77. That makes it very challenging for this tank to be able to get anywhere near its top speed limit of 31 kilometers an hour. And the traverse speed of this vehicle, which is 32 degrees a second, does feel rather sluggish. But really, while this vehicle is categorized as a light tank, it really is far more like a super heavy of tier 3, and that's because it gets a ridiculous 80mm of frontal armor, 50mm of side armor, and 50mm of rear armor. There are many tanks that you will play against, such as the PZ-1 Alf-C, that even if they load premium rounds, simply won't be able to penetrate you anywhere, which is what makes this vehicle so crazy. So are there any weaknesses that you might be able to take advantage of? Well, the lower plate is 80mm thick, and if a PZ-2 Alf-J angles his armor like this, the effective armor of the lower plate goes up to 90mm, while still maintaining a ricochet off the side armor. So unless you've got 100mm of penetration, don't bother to shoot this thing in the front. Also, if you thought the turret was any worse, well, you're going to be disappointed there because the turret armor ranges up to 200mm over the mantlet, and also the cheeks are still 50mm thick. And also, don't bother trying to shoot the tiny cupola on top of this tank as it is 80mm thick as well. So how about the side armor? Thankfully, there's no spaced armor over the gigantic portion of the upper hull, which is 50mm thick. Now, interestingly, the Panzer II-J used to have a weak point over this hatch on the side of the vehicle. This hatch used to be slightly weaker and was an opportunity for players with knowledge of the armor models to be able to penetrate the tank. However, this weak point was removed and it is now just as thick as the rest of the side armor. And so your best bet is just to try and get it as flat as possible and hope that you have over 50mm of penetration. With the back of the tank, it's also the same deal, but as you can see, there's a slight bit of angling. And don't shoot the sides of the back as there's actually 60mm rather than 50. One of the great opportunities for this vehicle is this area of armor here. As we can see, it's only 25mm thick. And so that means if you're quite a tall tank with good gun depression, then quite often you can shoot down on this area and manage to penetrate it. Or alternatively, if your standard ammunition has no chance of going above the 50mm that you need through the side armor, splash high explosive on this area of the tank, and you're likely to slowly but surely take it out. So what kind of an armament does the Panzer II-J get? Well, it's very disappointing actually, probably one of the worst guns at tier 3, which is a balancing feature of this vehicle. It has a 20mm autoloader with 10 shells in the magazine that it can fire out very quickly with only 0.13 delay between each shell firing. The reload of the autoloader is very short indeed. It only takes 3 seconds to be able to slam in another 10 shells into the magazine. Each of these 10 shells is only going to be doing 11 damage, and is very inaccurate with 0.57 accuracy. Really, it's almost impossible to snipe in this tank, and you will have to get into close quarters combat if you want to have a chance of even hitting your opponents. But the aim time is in contrast to this terrible accuracy. It's a rather nice 1.4 seconds, which will enable you to quickly re-engage targets. So now down to really the most terrible thing about this tank, and that is the penetration. With its standard rounds, it has 23 millimeters of penetration. That's not enough to get through most vehicles that it's going to meet. But you might notice that this penetration doubles if you choose to fire premium with this tank. But it's still only 46 millimeters of penetration, which means that even if you have a flat part of an enemy Panzer IIJ's armor, you're only going to be able to get through it roughly a third of the time, which can make it a very expensive way to try and take out an enemy vehicle when you take into account that each one of those premium rounds costs you 400 credits. Which means that roughly to take out a Panzer IIJ, if you have the side of his armor, it's going to cost you 28,000 credits of premium rounds. And even if you're just slowly taking out the enemy team, penetrating all of your shots and doing 110 damage per magazine, it's going to cost you 4,000 credits to do that damage, making it super easy if you want to be competitive in this tank to lose probably up to 50 to 100,000 credits a game if you manage to fire all of your ammunition. So apart from that, the turret traverse on this tank is a rather nice 40 degrees a second, which allows you to quickly re-engage targets, which when you combine with binoculars, allows you to get a very decent view range. But that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's take a look at how this monster of a vehicle performs in one of the most insane games of World of Tanks that I've ever seen. So now we've got the pleasure of watching Konvalina 11 playing in their Panzer IIJ in what is going to be an absolute monster of a round. And you know that you're going to have an absolute monster of a round when you see that magical province word in your Panzer IIJ. And that's because province, although originally was for every tier in the game, is now only available for tier 3 tanks. And so obviously if you're in a tier 3 vehicle and you're in province, that means that you're going to be top tier. And that's very important for a vehicle such as the Panzer IIJ, considering that it relies so heavily on having that 80 millimeters of frontal armor and the 50 millimeters of side armor. Now, why was province prevented from tier 10 matchups? Well, it's pretty obvious really. From here you can spot all the way across into the enemy base, and really such a small map like this, which is completely open, a 600-meter map, just doesn't really work when many tanks towards the high tier start to get towards that spotting distance cap of 445 meters. So if you can see the enemy right from the beginning, well, that's not very fair on some tank types, and it really turned into a camping map or just a blind rushing map. However, at low tiers where view ranges are less, in theory it should work, because you're not going to spot the entirety of the enemy team at the beginning. Now you might be thinking, Konvalina 11 here, are you a bot? Are you a bot? What are you doing? You're basically just sitting behind a building. Well, there's no artillery to be afraid of on the enemy team. And that's because Konvalina is going to use a rather dastardly tactic. Get themselves into a corner where only their frontal armor is going to be exposed to the enemy team. This is a bit of a dodgy, lame tactic in my opinion, but it's going to showcase the power of the Panzer IIJ, and that's what I'm really trying to show in this video. Effectively, Konvalina 11 spends the first 2 minutes of the game just watching their team die, and then completely whiffs an entire clip of APCR ammunition at that BT-7. Okay, time to wake up. You know, you've had your chill. Let's see if you can get stuck into this game now. Although, not a single tank on the enemy team has died, and you have lost 9 of your 15 vehicles. And so it begins. Only 2 of those 10 shots penetrated this T-15. Okay, now up to 6 penetrations out of 20 fired. Doing better that time, now 15 out of 30. And Konvalina picks up their first kill of the game on that T-15. And that T-15 must have felt immortal, right? That T-15 had 4 kills by now. And then just basically, as I described at the start of this video, banged their head into the brick wall that is the Panzer IIJ. Konvalina's actually doing a pretty good job of sniping here in the Panzer IIJ. Starting to get their lead a little better after the terrible shots that was on the BT-7 earlier. Shutting down the key knee on the enemy team. Second kill secured. Now this Cruiser 3 must be thinking, well, what do I have to do right now? What do we have to do to be able to to dig this absolute monstrosity out. But it's probably more likely or not that the entirety of the enemy team have no idea of the capabilities of Convalina's completely overpowered Tier 3 monster vehicle right now. Just to put things into perspective, a KV-1, quite a heavily armored Tier 5 Soviet heavy tank, has 75mm of frontal armor. This thing has got 80mm of frontal armor all across the front of the tank. And so that means that against Tier 3 vehicles, pretty much none of them have got a reliable opportunity to be able to go through the front. Finally, the last member of Convalina's team has died, being able to pick up 1 kill between 14 of them. And now that leaves Convalina in what was, I think it was a 1 versus 10 situation. 5 kills into the game. Here we go. One of the best things about Province is that the cap circle is just so completely open. In a high tier game, that would be absolutely crazy, considering that you could shoot into the cap pretty much wherever you are. There's almost no chance to cap on this map if anyone's left alive. Convalina pushes forwards to try and take out this T-26, but spots the Cruiser 3 that's in the cap circle, quickly takes the Cruiser 3 out, and then tries to readjust to be able to take on this T-26 towards their flank. Now the enemy team seems to feel like, okay, there's only 1 left. Why don't we just all go at this tank together? Surely we're going to be all right. Right, guys? Well, finally somebody manages to do a bit of module damage to Convalina, and something penetrates the tank there. Didn't quite see what it was, but it was probably likely to be either the Chi-Ha on the enemy team, being able to get through the side armor, as those Japanese tanks do have rather nice penetration. But the Chi-Ha is down. It's very important to take out vehicles that are most dangerous to you early on in the game. And the Chi-Ha is one of those tanks. And just look at this situation right now. What more do you really need to know about this vehicle? This kind of just describes it in a nutshell, right? Panzer 1C just unable to do anything. An AMX-38 unable to do anything. I believe it was that Chi-Ha that was doing anything to Convalina's tank. Now he's engaging a Panzer 38T on the enemy team. And just ignoring this AMX-38, because that is a heavily armored tank as well. And even though Convalina is shelling out the amount of ammunition they have spent so far, as we're going to see in the post-game stats, they're now going to really struggle to be able to get through this AMX-38, trying to shoot it in the gun. As we can see, though, Convalina's skill is very experienced, having the commander perk to be able to see what modules are damaged on the enemy team. The Panzer 38T tries to flank. Oh, no, you don't. 10th kill of the game. 11th kill of the game. 1,869 damage. How the hell is Convalina going to be able to take out this AMX-38? We're going to have to figure out where the weak points are. Convalina reloads a regular clip to try and detract the AMX-38, because I expect that they're going to have to try and get the flank. Has a quick look up to see if the Panzer 3A in the cap circle is going to be a threat. And finally, just ignores the AMX-38 and goes and takes out the Panzer 3A in the cap circle. Now turns around to deal with that French tank. Finally, some damage. There you go. That's where you need to hit it. Hit it in the side. However, the AMX-38 manages to take Convalina's tracks off. Remember, with 50mm of side and rear armor, it's very unlikely that the AMX-38 is even going to be able to get through that part of the tank. And just pushes them into the corner, almost in submission. And finally finds another location where they can penetrate the AMX-38. And from here, 11 APCR shells left, firing them very slowly into the tank. Now left with 8 shells in the game and having to deal with an FTAC, that Tier 2 tank destroyer. That pretty much sums up this tank, everyone. 13 kills. God knows how many hits Convalina has taken. We will have to wait for the post-game stats to be able to see that. And over 2 5,000 damage done for those 13 kills. Just absolutely ridiculous. This tank in a nutshell. Completely insane and overpowered. In a matchup such as this, but for every matchup such as this, there is another kind of matchup where this vehicle has to try and deal with tier 4 tanks. And trust me, when a Matilda is shooting at it, that's not going to do very well. But oh my word, Convalina just fired all of their ammunition at the FTAC and was unable to kill it. Now completely out of ammo, and the FTAC has 1 health point remaining. Oh my word. You're going to have to be a little bit creative about how you're going to finish this game off now, right? Luckily, it looked like the FTAC was either stuck or a bot. We're going to have to find out in just a minute. So get an idea of the mobility as well of the PZ2 Alps J. Haven't really had to see this tank move around too much, and it's not going very quickly at the moment, right? Not a damaged engine, not a badly skilled crew, evidently. This is as fast as the tank is. It's a very slow vehicle that moves around pretty much like an E100 would. An E100 is a very good example of the mobility of this tank. The FTAC starts to try and shoot at Convalina, but doesn't seem to be managing it. I don't even know really what is going on here. Is this a bot? Has it managed to get stuck on some crazy physics? Oh my word, how has it even managed this? The FTAC is stuck, trying to maybe fire to dislodge their tank. I bet you that Convalina 11 was just as confused as I am at this kind of a situation. Now remember, Convalina's on very low health here, and that FTAC has got decent penetration on its gun, posing them a serious threat. They make their way up the slope. Can't quite get up there, gonna have to make their way back down the slope, and I have no idea what is just going on with this FTAC. Nearly. I'm pretty sure if that FTAC was to wiggle their tank, they could probably get themselves out of trouble. How is Convalina going to deal with this situation? That's right. Go on. That way, up the slope. You little fat blob of a tank. Go on, just go give it a little bit of a cuddle. I'm sure that cuddling it to death will work, right? Oh! Oh! No, you just dislodged them. You didn't even do 1 point of damage with the ram. Now the FTAC has been released from their prison. What? It won't die. The FTAC is free. Is it going to be able to turn around to take him out? No. No. No, he's not. As Convalina 11 secures their 14th kill of this game. What a fitting end to an equally preposterous game of World of Tanks. Let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats. So Convalina picked up pretty much every single medal you could ever want in this game. Unsurprisingly, cool-headed for ricocheting at least 10 shots in a row. A crucial contribution, which is hilarious considering that their platoon mate didn't even manage to pick up a kill or do any damage. A Rezene medal for killing at least 14 out of 15 of the enemy team, a medal that I've never been able to achieve myself. A Naiden's medal for destroying all of the enemy light tanks, a high caliber for the highest damage in the game, a Top Gun for killing at least 6 vehicles, and a Defender for defending that corner of the base so well. The steel wall, and boy, what a steel wall this was. Convalina received 240 hits this game, giving them a potential damage of 4,700. That's enough to kill this vehicle over 18 times. And of course, Convalina also picked up the one that everyone wants, the Kolobanov's medal for standing alone against at least 5 opponents, in this case 10. Now unfortunately the detailed report is a little bugged as this replay is very old, but we can still work it out. Convalina fired 350 premium shells times by the 400 shell price. Oh my god, Convalina managed to spend 140,000 credits in a tier 3 tank. And even though this is one of the highest damage games of all time in the Panzer IIJ, Convalina only received 45,000 credits, which means that they roughly lost 100,000 100,000 credits in this game to play this tank in this way. And so that brings me to the conclusion, is this tank worth the €100 price tag that Wargaming are trying to charge for it? Well, if the vehicle was by itself, yes, it's not worth it at all. You'd have to be absolutely bonkers to spend that much on a tank that then you're going to hemorrhage credits in if you want to play it successfully. But the thing is, this vehicle is bundled with 30,500 gold. And when we check out the gold price, it is exactly the same, which effectively means that this vehicle is free. So what it really means is that you're not buying the Panzer II-J for €100, you're buying 30,500 gold for €100 and getting a tier 3 seal clubbing nightmare of a tank as an incentive. And I think that's the only way that anyone could ever recommend this bundle, is if you were in the market for a huge amount of gold to spend maybe throughout the whole of the rest of next year. Such as maybe if you were looking to purchase a huge amount of premium time or pick up multiple tier 8 premium tanks, that would make this a sane deal. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please consider giving the video a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if you want to see another shameful PZ2J video, then simply click through up here and you can go through to see what my reaction was to picking up a Kolobanov's medal in this tank for the first time. And let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this tank. Do you think it's fine to have in the game as a novelty? Or perhaps like me, do you think it's damaging to the balance of lower tiers? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.